I'm not here to denigrate or say that something is objectively bad, when in reality, someone might like the things that I dislike because all art is subjective. That being said, at the bottom of our list is objectively the worst FNAF game of all time.
Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host with the toast, Rye Toast, here to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's. I'll be honest, I wasn't really sure what to talk about today. I need to get more guests on because they have good ideas and it helps me to figure out what to talk about, and I like talking to other people. But I keep forgetting to reach out to people because ADHD go burr. So I was sitting there like, what the hell do I make a podcast about? And I realized it's been a while since I've officially ranked my personal favorite FNAF games in general and talked about like what I think makes them good, what I think makes some of them great. So I'm like, maybe now is the time to do that. It's essentially we're doing a tier list. I guess I'll try to put the image up at the end. I probably won't like really high detail edit it throughout the video because it's a podcast. But I'll be describing it as we go because I've made the tier list before recording so I can just refer to what I've made. And again, before we get into it, this is just my opinion. As much as I try to base my opinion in objectivity and fact, at the end of the day, what I think is compelling gameplay may not be to someone else, and what I think is a lame story may be really interesting to someone else. So take this all with a grain of salt. I'm not here to denigrate or say that something is objectively bad, when in reality, someone might like the things that I dislike because all art is subjective. That being said, at the bottom of our list is objectively the worst FNAF game of all time, FNAF 2. So, and I can hear some of you getting mad. So let's talk about it, shall we? Obviously I'm joking a bit. It's not objectively the worst game of all time, but subjectively, to me, it is. FNAF game anyway. It's so when I look at a FNAF game, there's three things that I'm looking for, and it's gameplay, it's lore, and it's horror. Like, though, if it has good gameplay, good lore, and good horror, I'm like, okay, this is a good FNAF game. Like, those are the three things I'm always looking for. To its credit, FNAF 2 has pretty good lore. Granted, it has lore in what I believe is the worst accessible way, that being just a random chance on death to see a vague minigame. And don't get me wrong, I think that's cool, and I think some of them in a game is great, but if all of your lore outside of the phone calls that every game has is within random chance death minigames, I think that sucks. I think there should be a way to access them. I think there should be a way for the player to puzzle solve and do a specific thing and access that minigame. The fact that the only way to play the FNAF 2 minigames is by repeatedly dying and hoping sucks. I think that's terrible. And I think it works against whatever good shit comes from the fact that it's good lore. Like, I admit, the FNAF 2 cutscenes, the FNAF 2 minigames, great. The in-between night cutscenes, great. But the fact that the minigames are so hard to get access to knocks it down a fair amount of pegs for me. And unfortunately, lore is its highest scoring category in my head. Because then you look at the horror. We'll save gameplay for last because that's my biggest complaint. When we look at the horror, when I made a recent video dunking on FNAF 2, admittedly, I say recent, I think that's over a year old now. Jesus. Anyway, admittedly, I think I was too harsh. I was talking about how Withered Chica isn't scary because she T-poses. I hold true that the T-pose is not scary. It for me, it's too silly. But as a design, I think the Withereds are excellently done. The designs of the Withereds are awesome, and they're very imposing. And the fact that they're in your office and tower over you is wonderful. I think the Withereds are done beautifully. Unfortunately, they're underutilized because if you're playing FNAF 2, and we will get into it, you only see them when they're about to attack you. And that's an issue, right? Because like some of their camera renders are genuinely haunting. Some of the camera renders of FNAF 2 are some of the best Scott's ever done. But because of the shit gameplay of FNAF 2, you're not allowed to look at those camera renders. Because by the time they're going to be in interesting positions, you better be winding that music box, boy. Like, I want to look at the camera renders. They're spooky. But to its credit, the Wizards, when they're in your office, are very imposing and have great camera renders if you were allowed to look at them. The toys are a miss. I think I've said this before. I think an easy way to fix the toys is have all of them should do what Toy Chica does, where Toy Chica removes her beak and gets the dot eyes. Freddy gets the dot eyes. Bonnie doesn't get the dot eyes, which is crazy. He should. And Freddy and Bonnie both have those snouts. They should be removed as well. If the toys went from these really cutesy characters to these amorphous, open mouth, dot eye creatures, I think that would be way more impactful, personally. And then they're still differentiated by their body, their colors, what they have on them, stuff like that. And then the game, so that's the horror. The gameplay of FNAF 2. My biggest gripe, because I hear a lot of people complain, oh, it's too fast, there's too many animatronics. That's not my complaint. I don't mind that there's a lot of animatronics. I like that there's a lot of animatronics. I think the strong suit of FNAF 2 is how big the cast is. The problem is there are, amongst the like 10 animatronics you're encountering, there are 3 mechanics. That's crazy. The fact that it's, okay, wind the music box, and then all you have to do is wind the music box and never think about it again. Check for your hallways with your flashlight, and simultaneously keep Foxy at bay with it. And if something's in your office, put your mask on. That's all you do. It is by far the most repetitive cycle in any FNAF game. Like, that's all you do. And the fact that there's 10 animatronics makes it worse, because the Wizards and the toys are held at bay for the exact same, for all intensive purposes. Toy Freddy, Toy Chica, Toy Bonnie, Withered Freddy, Withered Chica, and Withered Bonnie, and Mangle could all be the same animatronic. Balloon Boy could. Balloon Boy can't kill you, but he has the same fucking mechanic. So of our 10 animatronics, 8 of them could be the same animatronic. Why isn't it just the same one? Like, because Foxy is flashlight, the puppet is the music box. Everything else is the same animatronic. It just changes where they approach you from. That's all that changes, and that's not a huge change. My perfect FNAF 2 would have the toys share a mechanic, the Wizards share a mechanic, and Mangle have its own mechanic. And then that way, there's more differentiation without going too far. I understand if all 10 of them had their own mechanic, it would be too much, especially for casual play. So I get that. But still. Moving on, because, I gotta get through all, 11 or 12 games that I put on this playlist. Our next worst FNAF game is Sister Location. I won't spend too much time here, because I think did a very good job talking about the problems with Sister Location versus how good the Sister Location Custom Night is. So what I will say, Custom Night not included here, because I haven't played it enough to have my own opinion on it, but it seems a lot better than Sister Location. But my main complaint is what and many others have brought up. Sister Location is a visual novel with one really hard minigame in the middle. That's it. And that's cool. Like, the lore and story of Sister Location, awesome. But replaying Sister Location is a goddamn chore, because it's just a visual novel and it's a slow visual novel too. Like, visual novels can be very good. I mean, a perfect example for people who don't even like visual novels, Doki Doki Literature Club. Not only is it a visual novel, it's horror, and it's one of the best indie horror games in the scene. So, like, there's nothing wrong with being a visual novel, but not only is Sister Location a visual novel, it's a really bad one with a lot of really long, unskippable bits in it. Yes, Can you use the click team like cheat code to skip cutscenes? Of course. But if you skip cutscenes, you skip 80% of the game. So that's my problem with Sister Location. Moving up. This is going to be, I think, probably the most controversial placement on my list. I've gotten heat for saying FNAF 2 is terrible. I've gotten some heat for saying Sister Location is bad, but I feel like most people agree with that. This is going to get me, I think, the most criticism. For the record, if I'll show you the tier list at the end. FNAF 2 is an F tier. Sister Location is an E tier. Our only D tier game, our third worst, Ultimate Custom Night. I understand the point of Ultimate Custom Night, and I get the job that it's trying to fulfill. But my problem is, I think it's so complex that it becomes clunky. It doesn't mesh well. It doesn't work super well. And not only that, because of the massive size of characters and really pushing Click Team to its limit, the jump scares of Ultimate Custom Night are some of the worst in the entire franchise. 80% of them are shaking JPEGs or just seizuring animatronics. Like I really like a good jump scare, and there aren't any in Ultimate Custom Night. Like, Springtraps is moderately better. I think that's mainly because Springtrap's base jump scare is so bad. So I don't like playing Ultimate Custom Night when it just comes down to it. I don't like it. I've said also in the past that I like it when a game progresses naturally and teaches you as it goes. And I still hold that true. I've seen people say just play the challenge modes on the side sequentially and that will happen. I see your point, but you still have to like... It's still a lot that you're teaching yourself, kind of like with a wiki on the side almost, but with the in-game menus. And I like a wiki game. Like Terraria, love Terraria. You need a wiki to play Terraria. I get it, but I love that game. It's one of my favorite games of all time. Stardew Valley, much better off if you have a wiki on your side. I get that. But when it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's, I want it to be intuitive, and Ultimate Custom Night is not intuitive to me. Fourth worst, but officially in C tier. So this marks a turning point. C tier onward in this tier list are games that I have fun playing and would like to play again at any given moment. Like moving forward, any of these games are something that I have had fun playing and I'm okay with playing again. Bottom of C tier, Special Delivery, FNAF AR. This is also probably a hot take because it's not at the bottom. I feel like the fan base in general is like, oh, this is the worst game ever made of all time. That's not true. I think as a mobile game, were the prices exorbitant and ridiculous? Yes, I fully agree with that. That's bullshit. But the gameplay of Special Delivery, I thought was genuinely fun for a mobile game. The idea of using AR and defending yourself from animatronics in your space. I think that's really fun. And I like how many different and fun mechanics there are. And I wish like Dark Circus was more accessible because that's super cool. I think Special Delivery Forsaken, or maybe it's just FNAF AR Forsaken. I've got it on my phone. I've played it a bunch. That's super fun. I love that there's like a fan-made remake that's not, this exorbitantly priced Left 4 Dead pile of shit that Special Delivery became, because I do like the gameplay loop a lot from Special Delivery, and now I get to play that in Forsaken. So I think for a mobile game, it is genuinely really fun. I'm comfortable saying Special Delivery is the best FNAF mobile game. I don't think any FNAF game works well on mobile, frankly, and I think this game made for mobile does work pretty well. Moving up, our next game, Security Breach. Look, I get it. It's got problems. I fully understand if you hate Security Breach. I have a lot of fun playing it, though. I think genuinely I have a very fun time playing it. As far as I totally forgot to mention, another reason Special Delivery is so high on my list. Going back to gameplay, horror, and lore. The lore, really good with the emails. The gameplay, pretty fun. The horror, I hold true to this day. Five Nights at Freddy's Special Delivery has some of the best jump scares in the entire franchise. They do such a good job animating and modeling these jump scares. It's crazy. Springtrap's jump scare is his best in the franchise, and I fully believe that. So it's another reason why it's higher on the list. Security Breach, admittedly, horror, none whatsoever. I think the Endomaze is pretty scary. The daycare, pretty scary. Everything else, not scary at all. Not even a little bit. So horror is lacking there. So you look to gameplay and lore. I think the lore of Security Breach is genuinely pretty compelling, especially since it's so big and there's so many ways to interpret it. I think the lore of Security Breach, more than any other FNAF game, is going to be looked at and analyzed and like critiqued for a very long time. I think every game that comes out will change how we look at Security Breach because of how massive that game is. So I think that's a great point in its favor, frankly. As far as lore, or as far as gameplay goes, admittedly, this is probably, and I wouldn't say it's, I would say the horror is the weakest point of Security Breach. The gameplay, after all the patches that fixed out most of the game-breaking bugs, I think fundamentally Security Breach still has the problem of like, it wants to be a stealth game, but it punishes you for stealthing. So it kind of just turns into this game where you're running from point A to point B, obtaining something, and then running from point A to point B. There's not really like really clear or good moments of gameplay. Like there are some, but for them, like the boss fights are generally pretty good. But for the most part, it's kind of just a walking simulator or a running simulator. Like there's very little, like it really wants to be this big stealth game, but because it's such an open world type game, you really can't stealth. In like there's no point in it because you can just run around things. But if you stealth, you'll take up time and put yourself more at risk. So like the game actively punishes you if you do the thing that it wants you to. So you're incentivized to just run past. That being said, I think it's fun to run past. So, that's why it's kind of up here rather than at the bottom. A lot of these problems are addressed in Ruin. So I'll note here, Ruin has been separated from Security Breach for the purposes of this tier list. Moving up to the top of C tier, Freddy in Space 2, Chica in Space. No, Freddy in Space 3, Chica in Space. I'll be straight up. This is the only spin-off on the list because it's the only one that I've fully played and beaten. I really like Chica in Space. I think it's really fun. The gun mechanic, the fact that like the guns are very randomized and 3 of them are pretty good and one of them is by far the best gun in the entire game is really funny to me. It's like a little bit of gambling. I like games with a little bit of gambling. It's part of the reason why I've been liking Buckshot Roulette so much. I like to gamble in a safe environment where I can't lose money because I understand I definitely have a gambling addiction. It's never affected me because I know that I have one. So I've never entered a casino or like done sports betting or anything. I know for a fact, if I allow myself access to gambling, I will ruin my life. So I'm like, okay, here is a safe way for me to gamble. Buckshot Roulette, Chica in Space, like these very RNG dependent games. That's my this is my safe space to get that thrill and rush of that like gambling RNG without ruining my life. So because of that, I think that's a big reason why I like Chica in Space. And Scott never programmed a cooldown on the fire button, and I've got a hell of a trigger finger, so I can just obliterate things. I find a lot of fun. I speedran Chica in Space for like a couple weeks after it came out. Like I joined the Discord for like Freddy or FNAF speedrunning. Like I was in for the Chica in Space speedruns. I haven't in a while. Maybe I'll come back to it. I don't know. I still find a lot of fun in playing the game. So that's why it's at the top of C tier. Moving up. The bottom of B tier. We are getting to the creme de la creme. The best of the best. The bottom of B tier. Of everything here on out, I would say, is a genuinely really good FNAF game. Bottom of B tier. FNAF 3. I get it. Some of you immediately are bristling. because the gameplay of FNAF 3 is pretty rough. And I do agree with you. It is kind of get Willie to the corner and keep him there, and then everything else doesn't matter. I understand that. It is probably one of the easier FNAF games in the franchise for that reason. But the fact that when William escapes from you, he's so hard to track, and he's hard, like genuinely difficult to find, is really fun. The idea of like, oh, he's not in the corner anymore. He's moved 2 spaces. Where did he go? FNAF 3, I think, better than any other FNAF game, makes you panic. And like, if you can't keep your cool, you're not beating FNAF 3. Because the moment Springtrap is not on the camera you expect him to be, now everything snowballs. Right? Because like FNAF 3 is easy because if you get William in the corner and you play the sound cue when he leaves, you can pretty consistently keep him there and not interact with 80% of the game. Because 80% of the game is phantoms that punish you for accessing different things. Like Foxy will punish you if you go to try to reset stuff. Mango punishes you if you're on the vent cameras. Balloon Boy punishes you if you check, like Balloon Boy and Chica punish you if you check those cameras. So does the puppet. Freddy punishes you if you're not looking at something. You know, like there's phantoms exist to punish you when you're using the tools at your disposal. So when you keep William in the corner, suddenly you're not using any of them. The game is incredibly easy. The moment you lose track of him, panic sets in. Because now you have to switch between so many cameras, looking in really hard to find spots for William, especially like if you don't know where he's supposed to be, it is very difficult to find him. The amount of first-time playthroughs I've seen where people just straight up don't see him until they're dead is impressive. So it's like incredibly hard to find him. Meanwhile, every time you switch cameras to look for him, you have a chance of getting punished for it. So like things snowball, and then son of a bitch, you get attacked by Balloon Boy. You're like, oh god, I gotta reset the ventilation. You turn without thinking, Foxy's there, he attacks you. Like, it's so easy to panic and spiral in FNAF 3, and I love that. The horror, pretty good. I would say outside of the jump scares. I think the jump scares are really weak in FNAF 3, but the designs and the set design are beautiful, wonderfully done. It's no wonder Springtrap is, I think to this day, the community's favorite like animatronic model, because Scott knocked it the fuck out of the park with that model. That model is so good. And the fact that throughout this entire franchise this is the first time that an animatronic is kind of moving. Right? Because like in the other games, and I think this is more so in Help Wanted, but in the other games, the animatronics are stationary and then they'll be somewhere else. Because like, you know, they're animatronics. They're moving, but they're robotic. They're not going to sway. I don't think this is the case for FNAF 3, but in Help Wanted's version of FNAF 3, I think it's an amazing touch that Springtrap is not stationary, but instead is like swaying a bit, hinting to the fact that he is organic. I think that's awesome. The lore as well, I think the way the lore is done within FNAF 3 and how it's presented, I think is the best in the franchise. I think the idea of these accessible and different ending routes of lore minigames that you get hints for in the guaranteed in-between night ending, or in-between night cutscene, I think this is the best lore has ever been presented in the franchise. This is like my perfect version of how to access hidden lore. It's 24 minutes in. We still have to do questions, and we've got 7 games left. Oops. I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. So yeah, FNAF 3, I love it. Just above FNAF 3, top of B tier. Only 2 games in B tier. You know what? I'm going to swap these two, actually. Top of B tier, Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Simulator, FNAF 6. This is also going to be controversial. I feel like FNAF 6 is a lot of people's absolute favorite FNAF game, and I understand that. I think there's a lot of really, really solid stuff in FNAF 6. I mean, the tycoon level, like the tycoon half of stuff some of my favorite FNAF gameplay. I love tycoons. I love building my little restaurant and like beefing it up. The fact that it doesn't affect nighttime gameplay that much outside of the occasional lefty grab kind of sucks. I think it is a missed opportunity that the restaurant you're building does not change the night mode. Apparently there's a fan game that does something like that I've been told to play. Maybe one day I will. But regardless, I think I do get a little like, that kind of sucks. You should be able to affect the nighttime mode based on how you do the daytime mode outside of just like, oh, I have more money now, so I can upgrade my stuff. Like, that's cool, but I wish there was more. The lore in FNAF 6 is great. And once again, presented beautifully. The idea of like, some of these attractions are playable, and some of those playable attractions, if you do something specific, will unlock lore. That's, again, perfect. A way to repeatedly unlock lore in an understandable way, but a way that isn't impossible to figure out on your own, right? Like I think Midnight Motorist and Fruity Maze are probably the ones to teach you this, right? Especially Midnight Motorist. Midnight Motorist, you get it pretty early. It's a pretty fun game, so you're going to be playing it a lot, and then you notice there's a break in the wall, and suddenly it's like, oh, there are secrets here. Then Fruity Maze, it's pretty easy to get a high score on, so it's like, oh, I'm going to want more money. I'll play Fruity Maze a couple times, and as long as you beat it twice, suddenly you know something's up. You know, that's awesome. Security Puppet, it's a little more niche that you have to like get this specific thing, but if you're already testing stuff out, it makes sense that you would find it. Not to mention, I mean, huge shout out to the Henry monologue, which up until this past year, I think was my favorite moment in the FNAF franchise. Because, I mean, and it's still a lot of people's favorite moments, because the Henry monologue is just genuinely really powerful, really good. Just a good monologue with great visuals and a good satisfying conclusion to that first era of FNAF. Not counting Ultimate Custom Night, because fuck Ultimate Custom Night. Anyway, moving up to A tier. The bottom of A tier. This is the biggest debate I had this placement, because depending on the time of day and depending on how I feel, this game either goes to literally number 1 or as low as C tier. So this has been the hardest to place in the entire tier list. But I think if I really buckle down in my heart, I put it here. And that's FNAF World at the bottom of A tier. Out the gate, out the jump, horror, non-existent. There is no horror in FNAF World. But the lore and gameplay, the lore, genuinely compelling, very interesting. The gameplay, I think the gameplay of FNAF World is really fun. I have a lot of fun with FNAF World. I think it's genuinely one of the more fun FNAF games that have been created. I like having a silly time with these characters we spent 10 years getting to know. I like just hanging out and having a silly time, man. I like Pokemon, I like RPGs, I like turn-based stuff. I have a fun time here. It's a reason why there's a number 1 spot that's going to surprise some of you, because the game's not out yet, but it's already my number 1. And it's for a similar reason of why FNAF World's an A tier for me. I like FNAF World. I think it's a fun game. I have a lot of fun playing it. Hop off my goat. Anyway, next up on the tier list of A, FNAF 4. FNAF 4 has dramatically shifted for me in the past couple months. Because for a while, FNAF 4 was near sister location Ultimate Custom Night for me, because I just can't play FNAF 4. I'm just bad at it. I realized I never talked about why FNAF 6 is low. It's the gameplay. It's the nighttime gameplay. FNAF 6 is in B tier because I think the nighttime gameplay is bad. I just think it's a bad gameplay loop, and I think that the fact that like every single FNAF game has been like, oh, here's the correct way to play, this is the mechanics, this is how it works. Every other FNAF game has been explained that way. FNAF 6, kind of a crapshoot. I think that's bad. I think if your game's mechanics feel like a crapshoot, it's not good. So that's why it's in B for me. I don't like the nighttime gameplay at all. So FNAF 4. FNAF 4, I didn't understand how to play for a long time, and I first primarily played FNAF 4 on release, when the audio was so fucking unbalanced that you would have to crank it to maximum volume to hear the breathing, and then the jump scares would deafen you. That sucks. Since then, the audio's been balanced pretty soon after, and I have relearned and like studied how to play FNAF 4. Now that I know how to play FNAF 4, genuinely, I think one of the most compelling gameplay loops in FNAF. It's very risk versus reward, and I love that. I think listening for the breathing and check and like deciding, do I check or do I just close the door? Like I love that. Have I ever beaten FNAF 4? No, I can't beat Night 5. I'm really bad at it. But I have a lot of fun playing it, and that's what matters. And then the lore in this game, great. The idea that's just like, hey, it's pretty straightforward here. You're going to get this mini game after every night. And unlocking it is the challenge because this is a genuinely hard game. That's awesome. As far as the horror goes, it's great. I think the nightmares are a little over-designed, but because they're nightmares, it's fine. And I genuinely love the nightmare jump scares. The fact that they're picking you up is awesome. I love that. So yeah, I just, FNAF 4, great. No notes. FNAF 4 is like, to me, FNAF 4 is probably this is like the perfect what a Five Nights at Freddy's game should be. Now, that being said, no cameras. So like maybe not, because I do think cameras are very essential and important for FNAF. But still, the gameplay loop is perfect. Add cameras some way, you got me sold. Moving up, Ruin. Now, I've heard the criticism that Ruin is kind of a walking simulator, and I don't agree with that, but I do see where that's coming from. And I think it's just because of how linear the game is. But frankly, I think being forced to be in a linear space made the security breach Pizzaplex a way more compelling, interesting, and frankly, scary location. Like, there's some genuinely good horror in Ruin that is not present at all in Security Breach. And I think the mask mechanic is really compelling and fun. The risk versus reward of like, a lot of your threats are non-existent in the mask, and you need to use the mask to interact with stuff. But the longer you're in the mask, the more likely you are to get hunted down. That's fun. That is good. That is compelling. And the lore of Ruin is great. The lore of Ruin, like Security Breach, I think will be reevaluated with every subsequent game. I think it has to be. So that was awesome. I love that. Moving up, because it's 32 minutes. Oh, we still got 3 more games to talk about. Help Wanted 1, baby. I've heard a lot of valid criticism of Help Wanted 1, but I still can't get over it's FNAF games in VR. I'm sorry. Like, I think Help Wanted 1 flat mode is not very good. But Help Wanted 1 as a VR game is one of my favorite FNAF games by far. One, there's a lot of fun mini games in it. I love Foxy Log. I love the Foxy Log ride is Help Wanted 2. Oops. I love the Captain Foxy's ride or whatever it's called. I love the vent. Now, I love the vent repair. I love repairing the stuff. I admit with them, not very replayable. I think the biggest criticism I have for Help Wanted 1, it's not super replayable. It's very, this is how you play the game, which does suck. But luckily, there is something super replayable. FNAF 1, 2, and 3 in VR. That's awesome. There is nothing more terrifying in a FNAF game than being in these VR scenarios. And like, there's 2 moments in Help Wanted that really shake people when they play. And this shook me to my core. First one, when you're first playing FNAF 1 and you see Bonnie or Chico walk up to your door, 8 foot tall, and then slowly turn to you. That's genuinely like, oh, I'm fucked. Like, that's a moment of like, oh shit. And then another one, I think a big one, is the Nightmare Fredbear FNAF 4 level. Just because of his presence. Like, if you're on the wrong side of the room and he comes in through the other door, that moment where he like ducks under the door and slowly stomps into your flashlight, whew, that's fucked. Fuck that. That should be illegal. That's crazy. So just that aspect is amazing. I think the reason it's an A tier and not S tier is, like I said, it's not very replayable. And admittedly, now that Help Wanted 2, I've never understood before when people were like, the models and animations are rough in Help Wanted. I never agreed with that. And then Help Wanted 2 came out, and I was like, oh shit, these models and animations are amazing. I now see what you're saying about Help Wanted 1. So I get that. So that's why it's an A tier. 3 games left. Bottom of S tier. FNAF 1. What can I say? I'm a bit nostalgic. I understand nostalgia plays a pretty big bias here. I think as a game, FNAF 4 is probably a little bit better. But FNAF 1 just had a really simple and effective formula. There's a reason it spawned a franchise and thousands of fan games. Hundreds of thousands of FNAF fan games, probably. It's a fun, eloquently simple, compelling gameplay loop. It just works, guys. That and FNAF 1, I think, has an uncanny feeling to it that no other Five Nights at Freddy's game has gotten close to. I think FNAF 1 does the uncanny horror that animatronics work best in the franchise, which does kind of suck. I think the closest this horror comes to getting it right is the salvage minigames from FNAF 6. Other than that, I think like there is good horror and scarier things in this franchise than FNAF 1, but the uncanny horror of FNAF 1 is unmatched. It's perfect. Also, some really genuinely good camera renders. Some bad ones, some goofy ones. Chica in the dining room, bad and goofy, but a lot of other ones are really compelling and strong. I don't know what else to say. It's FNAF 1. Of course it's goated. Number 2, our highest ranking currently out game, Help Wanted 2. I love Help Wanted 2. I cannot get enough of Help Wanted 2. It's a 10 out of 10 in all 3 of my categories. 10 out of 10 for gameplay. One of, if not the most fun I've ever had playing a FNAF game. Just a genuinely good VR minigame collection. Food Prep, Fazzer Blast, Bonkabon, the DJ Music Man. There's so many different kinds of very replayable gameplay sections. It's just fun. It's just really seriously fun. It's so fun, especially in VR. That being said, the horror is a bit lacking. There are some good horror segments. I think the Endo levels really shine, like Food Prep Pizza and the Endo Warehouse. The sister location levels really shine for some horror. For me, those are really the standouts. Nothing else was like scary, I guess, that really got me. I can't think of anything else, frankly. Like there are tense moments, but as far as like actively scary, I think that's it. The DJ Music Man with the mini Music Men does get startling at times. I'll give it that. So the horror is a bit lacking, I admit. But like the gameplay, again, 10 out of 10. The lore of this game, wonderful. We all kind of knew the like, okay, we're probably Cassie's dad part of it, but there's so much of this game that's like a huge mystery that we just need more information for. But it's so interesting that they gave us so much information and so little answers. I think that was done incredibly well. So it's got to be my number 1 of games that have come out. But I keep saying there's one game that isn't out yet that is top of my list. What do you, and I hear, what could that be? What game could be so hyped that before playing it, you know it's your number 1? Is it Into the Pit? I get that, but no, I'm waiting for Into the Pit to come out. Is it the new Steel Wool game that's going to be announced? Is it the next? We don't know if there's a Steel Wool game. Cut that. Is it the Steel Wool announcement coming out on August, 4th that we're all excited for? No, because I don't know what that is. It could just be DLC. 5 laps at Freddy's, baby. I am so excited for a Five Nights at Freddy's kart racer. You don't understand. Kart racers may be my favorite genre of game. I fucking love kart racers. Crash Team Racing, Mario Kart, Garfield Kart. I'm not kidding. It's kind of fun. It's dumb. It's bad, but it's kind of fun. Sonic Racing All-Stars. Fucking Muppet Race Mania. Like I love kart racers. Kirby Air Ride. fuck, if you count Sonic Riders, I love Sonic Riders. Like, I love kart racers. So a kart racer with Five Nights at Freddy's characters, if it is even a little bit good, I will be playing that weekly. I'm not fucking around. And if they have multiplayer, I'm doing a tournament. I guarantee you. But yeah, I just really like kart racers. That's my tier list. If I remember to, I'll put it right here. But let me know yours. I'm curious what y'all's tier list would be. I wouldn't say email them. I guess like just share them in the comments. I feel like is a good spot to put them, because I wouldn't want to flood the email with like tier lists that I can't really talk about on the podcast. So you can probably just comment like what your rankings are, I guess. Or at me on Twitter. Always do that. But speaking of questions, we talked about FNAF games for 40 minutes. Let's talk about our questions. If I remember correctly, we got some really good questions. So we'll start with, and if you want your questions answered, you can send them to Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. That is in the description to copy and paste because it's a paid to type. You can also submit them on the Q&A feature on Spotify. I mix them in as well. Our first one comes from Tsu, and y'all, thank you for your question. What if the fact that no one showed up to Cassie's birthday wasn't circumstantial, but intentional? This is such a good question. Thank you for your question. So they go on to talk about GGY being manipulating and like trying to single out Cassie. And it's such an interesting concept because they do make a huge point in Ruin that like nobody showed up to Cassie's birthday party except for Gregory. And the big question here is, did Gregory show up or did GGY show up? The idea of, hey, we've got Vanny, we've got GGY, we need more victims, let's isolate people. And them using the Pizzaplex and changing the dates of parties, like, and rearranging things so nobody knows when Cassie's actual birthday is, so she has this horrible day. And then Gregory shows up to save the day, securing another trusting victim. That is amazing. Do we have any evidence that's what happened? No. But is it very possible and fits with the character we've seen of GGY? 100%. This is, for all intents and purposes, I'm accepting this in my theories moving forward. I think that's so cool. I think that's so compelling. And I think it makes sense and explains a little bit more about Cassie and Gregory's relationship. So I love that. I think that's really cool. I don't have much to add to that. I just like that. So thank you for your question / suggestion. Our next question comes from Robin and y'all. What are your predictions for the next FNAF movie? I've heard a lot of your discussion about whether people think it will be a prequel or not. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for your question. I don't think it's going to be a prequel anymore. I think that was squashed with some of the press releases that have happened with Blumhouse and everything. That it's like it's not a prequel. That being said, there are going to be toys in it, right? We saw the Jim Henson Creature Shop picture that had Toy Bonnie and Mangle in it. So like, okay, the toys are coming for FNAF 2. How and why? I think my prediction, I think Aunt Jane survived the Golden Freddy attack. We don't get a confirmation that she's dead. We see her get it. We know she got attacked and we see her on the floor. So like probably dead, probably. I think a good non-bullshit twist is that she survives, and now that William Afton is dead, or Steve Raglan or whatever have you, nobody owns the Freddy's brand anymore. And I think Aunt Jane opens up the new Freddy's, which will have the toys in it. That's the only thing I can think of. Other than that, I don't know. Because like, if the toys are here, a new Freddy's restaurant has to be made if it's not a prequel. And it's hard to do that if William, the only one who would want to, is dead. Unless Vanessa's trying to like make up for the past and make an actually safe Freddy's. I could see that too. Those are my really only thoughts because we still don't even have a trailer. So I'm not sure. Once we get that trailer, I'll make an analysis for sure. Thank you for your question though, Robin. Next question comes from Ingrid, they, them. What are your thoughts about Michael maybe being the bad guy? Because in FNAF 6, there's a poster in the alley where Michael is depicted as a puppet of William. Find that poster weird. Thank you for your question. I actually made a full video on this earlier this year. I don't think Michael is necessarily a bad guy. I think he was manipulated by William to be his helper, essentially. Think, going back to the movie, think Vanessa in the FNAF movie. Would you say Vanessa is a villain? No. Is she actively helping William Afton do this horrible stuff? Yes. But she's very clearly a victim too. That's how I view Michael up until Sister Location, I think. But yeah, I made a full video on that. You're welcome to watch it. It's something about like Michael was the puppet or something like that. I don't know. But thank you for your question, Ingrid. And we have one more from Drawbo, they, them. What is the most confusing game in the FNAF franchise lore-wise? This is a good question. There's a lot of candidates here. FNAF 6 is up there because Midnight Motorist alone is so confusing and hard to interpret. So I think FNAF 6 is up there, but I don't think it's FNAF 6. I think Sister Location is pretty straightforward as well as 1 through 4. So I think, honestly, I might give it to FNAF World. Because FNAF World is a big question mark in a lot of people's timelines. I think I know what FNAF World is and when it happens, but the details even are still like really up there. So I think FNAF World is probably the most confusing lore-wise. And then second would probably be Security Breach just because of the amount of lore in that game. I think that's my answer. But thank you for your question. And once again, that was super fast. We kind of speed around that, but it's past 40 minutes. So that's what happens. Once again, if you want your questions answered on the podcast, send them into Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. It's in the description to copy and paste because it's a pain to type, or you can send them on Spotify. But thank you all for hanging out. I guess we'll call it here. We kind of sped around them, but you know, we are running late, so that's what happens. Thank you for watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. We hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.